Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Cancel Vacation. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a social justice, social media mob looking to cancel her in this all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Cancel Vacation in paperback and e-readers today. A couple of weeks ago, a viewer wanted me to do a video about Whiskey Pete, and I thought they were talking about the legendary Las Vegas figure who was a part of the time of Prohibition, who wound up shooting at many of his patrons who came to his gas station where he wound up selling bootleg whiskey. Unfortunately, there was a miscommunication between myself and the viewer regarding what they posted in the Cash App, and as they were not really clear in their statements with the donation, what they wanted was a video about Pete Hegseth, the so-called Secretary of War for the Orange Man, and they wanted me to talk about my thoughts regarding this guy, Pete Hegseth, the so-called Secretary of War. Now, I have an official policy here regarding the Orange Man and all of the members of his cabinet, in that I have a policy where I don't make videos about those individuals. However, I already took this donation and there's no way to return it, so I have to make this video under obligation to this viewer. But any other request for anything regarding the Orange Man or the people who work for him will have your donation refunded, because I'm not making any videos about the Orange Man or any of the people who are a part of his extremely dysfunctional administration. Now, when it comes down to Pete Hegseth, or as they call them, Whiskey Pete, he basically is supposed to be our so-called Secretary of War, who was originally the Secretary of Defense, but there's no real way for this guy to basically defend the country because he's basically coming from a place of dysfunction. Now, when it comes to Pete Hegseth, he really isn't qualified in any way, shape, or form to be any sort of Secretary of Defense. Basically, this guy comes from a place of misinformation and conspiracy theories that he was allowed to speculate on Fox News for many years, and now this man has been placed in charge of our military by the Orange Man, because basically he's saying what the Orange Man wants to hear, and our country is in a place where it's not really going to be in a place where it can defend itself, because our country basically has an incompetent person in charge of our military. Now, our military basically has been a mess for a couple of years, and that's now been exacerbated because we don't have competent leadership leading us as related to defending the country. No, what we have here is a guy who basically, again, gets most of his ideas about defense from misinformation that he's read online on all of these dysfunctional places like the dark web, or many of these other dysfunctional places like 4chan or Reddit, or some of these, again, super right-wing message boards, and he thinks that the state of our military is a mess based on what he's heard on these sites about different things that have gone on as related to what is speculated with the Biden administration. Again, this guy really isn't coming from a place where we come from, the military, and that's really shown in the meetings he's had, where he's gone out here and gone on rants like he did with the people who were, again, top generals, again, castigating these individuals who you would need as allies. Again, this man doesn't know how to lead anything, and basically sees the military not as a place of looking to protect the country, but as some sort of place to go out here and be a part of the Orange Man's fiefdom in enforcing his backwards and dysfunctional policies. Now, with the Whiskey Pete, again, this guy's coming from a place of extreme dysfunction, and that was shown by his whole campaign as related to boats in Venezuela that were alleged to have been bringing illegal drugs to other parts of the world, and his effort to go out here and look to fire weapons at those boats. And as people were, again, these boats were being fired on, he basically ordered that one of these boats be fired on twice, as survivors were on this boat, which was a violation of war rules and, again, a violation of policy. But because this guy, again, doesn't understand anything, he thinks you can solve a problem like illegal drugs coming into the country by going out here and looking to fire weapons at these boats, like some sort of action movie like the ones I used to watch in the 1980s, like the ones that featured people like Michael Dudikoff or Chuck Norris. And in those movies, the idea of zero-sum solutions as related to the drug war was to, again, attack these drug dealers and attack these drug dealers to keep drugs from coming into the country, when in actuality, when it comes to drugs coming into the country, the issue isn't really the suppliers, it's really the demand, because the number one consumer of drugs inside of the United States are white males and white females, and with white males and white females being the primary consumer of drugs, this is the thing that's causing all of the demand for the drugs, that has people looking from other countries to supply the drugs into the country. And this is basically America reaping what it sowed, later than what it sowed, greater than what it sowed, as related to what Ronald Reagan did to the black community in the 1980s and Richard Nixon did to the black community in the 1970s when they declared their wars on drugs. Richard Nixon basically wanted to use his war on drugs to declare war on black people and look to wage that war by having these countries that they basically are saying that they're so against, like Venezuela and Nicaragua and many of these other countries that were importing drugs into the country on behalf of the United States. Basically, now what's happening is that since this whole plan has backfired as related to, again, eradicating black people as related to their drug wars, and white people have become more dependent on these drugs, what has happened is America now has a drug problem, and the problem is white people can't get enough drugs, and since they can't get enough drugs, this is the reason why you have all these drugs coming from these countries. Like the Orange Man wants to speculate, oh, the fentanyl is coming from China, the fentanyl is coming from places like Venezuela, who now the Orange Man wants to say are our enemies, but during the Nixon and Reagan era they were fine being our allies as long as they could sell the drugs to destroy black people. But when the white people are the ones demanding the drugs, oh, these countries are enemies, and again shows how Whiskey Pete doesn't really understand the reality of this whole drug problem. This whole drug problem was something that white America created. Again, they created this drug problem, and they're just reaping what they sowed, later than what they sowed, greater than what they sowed, and they don't want to acknowledge where the real problem is, so they go out here and manufacture an enemy in the Venezuelan people, just like they did with many of the black people during the time of the crack epidemic. They wanted to make it where the black drug dealer was the bad guy, or the foreign guy supplying the drugs was the bad guy, but the real bad guy was looking Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush in the mirror. They basically created this whole drug problem that we have here in America, and again, nobody wants to acknowledge that problem in the Orange Man's administration. They don't want to acknowledge it the same way they didn't want to acknowledge it in the Nixon or the Reagan era, where again the problem is not the supply, it's the fact that white America has been the one demanding all the drugs, and as they've been demanding these drugs,
what's been happening here is that we get guys like Whiskey Pete who think they can use zero sum solutions like they saw in some 1980s movie. Oh, this is going to stop the drug dealers. No, not going to stop it as long as you've got demand. And as long as you're the one making the demand, you're going to have people who are going to supply this demand. And sadly, no one has learned this as related to what happened during the days of bootleggers like the original Whiskey Pete. Now, in the era of the original Whiskey Pete, he basically was a bootlegger because America, again, wanted to deny its addiction to alcohol, and we tried to call ourselves banning alcohol during Prohibition, and all that did was not lead to people not drinking alcohol, but led to an increase in organized crime and led to an increased demand for alcohol at places like speakeasies, which were considered to be socially cool because now alcohol was considered to be something rebellious that people could go out here and do. And basically, with this whole attempt to regulate alcohol by making it illegal, they made it an even worse situation with organized crime gaining economic and political power. And as organized crime gained economic and political power, due to the American demand for alcohol, eventually what happened was America realized it made a mistake and then wound up repealing these laws in 1933 and eventually just said, hey, the only regulation we can make is to say that only an adult can use these items. And the whole thing is with these drugs, you basically created this same problem. You created the same problem here in America, but you created this problem because you didn't want black people to rise economically. You didn't want black people to rise politically. And the whole situation has completely backfired on America. And you've got guys like Pete Hegseth who, again, think they can solve the problem of drugs by going out here and, again, thinking, oh, I can blow up some boats. No, you're not going to do anything to stop demand this way because demand basically isn't, again, stopped that way. No, now you've got all these people, again, trying to spin things like, and I've heard like one ad from New York talking about addiction is a disease. I found that funny because when black people during the crack epidemic were smoking all this crack, it wasn't a disease back then. No, the whole theory was, okay, we gotta lock these black people up. We gotta put these black people in jail. We gotta make these black people do life in prison. But when it's white people getting high, when it's white people going out here smoking up, when it's white people having mental health episodes due to long-term use of marijuana and other drugs like fentanyl and crystal meth, oh, it's a health issue. And again, just shows me how racist this country is as related to the creation of the problems they create for themselves. And again, Whiskey Pete basically is trying to fix a symptom of a problem that his own party wound up creating back in the 1970s when Richard Nixon declared war on drugs, which was really a war on black people. And what's happening now is that you have Pete Hegseth, again, showing how backwards these white folks still are, again, buying into misinformation and conspiracy theories, again, doing no research whatsoever. Hey, let's just go blow up some boats. No, that's not how you stop, again, drugs that you brought into the country. And again, the only way to get to a solution is to admit your hand in this stuff. I mean, these people, again, did this deliberately to try to destroy black people, and now that it's destroying them, they want to come up with these cartoonish, again, 1980s action movie type plans to try to stop the demand. But again, you did this to yourself. You did it to yourself, and again, America's reaping what it sowed, later than what it sowed, greater than what it sowed, because God is not mocked. And it don't matter how many boats you blow up. Again, the problem with drugs here in America is staring white people in the face, because you wouldn't have, again, an issue with drugs if it wasn't for all these folks going out here and taking this stuff. And guys like Whiskey Pete, again, they don't know what the solution is because they live in a world of misinformation, a world of misinformation from the 80s as related to the whole drug war. Again, you bought into your own propaganda, again, about drugs. And again, if you knew about drugs, you would know, hey, blowing up boats don't really stop nothing, because, again, there wouldn't be no boats coming into the country if you weren't the ones wound up taking this stuff. I mean, the people taking this stuff are many of your rich kids, many of your actors, many of your average working white folks. They're the ones taking this stuff, and as they take this stuff, again, they're basically the ones causing this problem. But you have Pete Hegseth, who thinks he can make America great again by blowing up some boats and some empty symbolic gestures that will mean nothing whatsoever, because attacking the supply does not stop the demand. And as long as there is demand, you're going to have people who are not going to say no to drugs because they want the drugs, because some of them want to be cool, some of them want to deal with stress, some of them just want to get high. And again, that's the whole culture of America, people looking to escape. And nobody wants to talk about that, especially Whiskey Pete, because talking about that basically shatters all the narratives as related to the misinformation and conspiracy theories that he wants to believe. And that's what makes the whole Orange Man's group, again, really dysfunctional. They clearly are not qualified to deal with the situation as related to drugs in this country, because they come from a perspective of the 1980s, of Nancy Reagan's Just Say No. And the problem is that Americans, while they talk about Just Say No, we're saying yes to the point where drugs are in such demand that all people do is smoke up and get high these days. And that's what's led to all the mental health episodes we're seeing these days. We're seeing all these episodes these days because all these people smoke up, they get high, and they can't function. And again, what's really sad is that we've got an administration that's just as dysfunctional as the people taking the drugs, and dysfunctional in that they don't really understand the problems that are leading to this drug problem. Again, they think they can make America great again like the 1980s, when in actuality it was the people in the 1980s that created the drug problems we have here today. Now, this was a video requested by one of my viewers, and if you want to request a video, you can send a donation for a minimum of $15 to the Cash App or the PayPal, and if I know something about that subject, I will make that video for you. And if you ask requests for about videos regarding the Orange Man, you will get your money refunded, because I don't make videos about the Orange Man or anyone in his administration, but I did this because I already had made a video and it was the wrong one. So I'm coming back to make this again because this is a regular viewer of my stuff, but any other requests for Orange Man videos will have your money refunded, because I'm not making that kind of content. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes' Godbreaker. The man who rules the world takes on the Asgardian god of thunder in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' Godbreaker in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.